In this lesson, we'll simulate the truck rolling by using a roll cage or a roll bar. So here I have my high-resolution truck, and I'm going to have to create a separate object because I don't want to take this high-resolution vehicle and attempt to do an NCLOS simulation where it's denting and rolling at the same time. Now, ultimately, that's our goal. However, trying to get this large mesh to perform the way we want it to is going to be impossible, just an overall nightmare. So instead, we're going to take a simplistic object and use that to create our rolling animation or our vehicle flipping animation. So again, there's our high res, but if we look, we've already modeled a roll bar or a roll cage here. Okay, and this is a very low-end piece of geometry, and it's intentionally done so because I don't want to have extra vertices in there that the NCLOS simulation is going to try to work on. The less vertices I have, the larger the faces I have, the better my flipping effect is. Okay, and I don't know if it's better, let's not say better, but it's going to be easier to achieve. Okay, if I've got a lot of vertices in there, that means I have to increase my values in order to get the rigid nature of a roll cage or roll bar like we have here. So less vertices works a lot better for us. Okay, and so this is going to be the piece that will eventually do all of the flipping part of our destruction. Then we'll come back later and add our high resolution objects to this surface here and have those dent as this animation plays out. So let's add some properties to this and take a look where we're going here. And this is great to do offline like we are. We're not in our final scene. Makes things a lot less confusing, and I can do a lot of testing right here. So I'm just giving this kind of an awkward angle so it'll drop down onto our surface in kind of a cool fashion so we can actually see some real action happening here. So we'll just raise it up there, and let's switch over to End Dynamics, and I'll go to End Mesh and choose Create End Cloth. And we'll go back to our nucleus, and let's turn on our plane. Okay, and we're just checking, make sure, yep, our simulation works, and it just falls into a little bit of a puddle there. Now, interesting enough though, again, just to reiterate, less vertices works really good here. You can see that even without doing anything to that standard material, the object is trying to retain its shape because it has such large faces. So we're not getting all that extra deformation, okay, like we saw with the cube. All right, but nevertheless, it's still falling into just a vertex puddle there. So let's go in and let's make some changes here. And the first thing I'm going to do is turn off self-collision. That can help, but for the most part, because we're going to be relying on our rigidity parameter, the self-collision is really just going to add more computation time. So we're going to shut that down. And let's look at our thickness here. Let's knock that down just a little bit. I think that's a little too high. That's a little bit better. So let's keep going. Now, the bounce, friction, and stickiness are definitely going to be parameters that we're going to have to pay attention to. But for right now, they're not going to help us a whole heck of a lot because we're not moving this along a surface. You'll definitely see some reaction here when it drops, and reasons why we would come back and add these. But for the time being, we're just going to leave these blank until we actually have a surface that we need it to collide against. Right now, just in our testing phase, it's not going to make too much of a difference. I'm going to go down and jump right to our rigidity, and let's add a value here of 2. And we're going to keep going down, and let's add a mass of 75. Okay, and that's good high mass. It's a metal surface. It should be pretty strong. Let's hit play. All right, and immediately we get a nice A little bit of a bounce there. Definitely not a cloth object and definitely a rigid surface. Now, a couple of other things I want to do here is add some bend resistance. So we're going to add a value of 20 there. Adding that bend resistance will help keep the simulation just a little bit tamer. When it's set to a value of 0.1, that's really going to allow it to bend. So we're just adding just a little bit of resistance there. Certainly not the resistance like we did for the box example where we were adding 200, but only like 20. And the reason for that is because we are also using the rigidity here. Okay, so I don't want to raise it up to 200. It'll work. It's just that, again, that's going to be more computationally expensive, and it's a bit of a waste. Adding just a little bit here will keep my simulation tame. It's not going to try to bend like it was cloth. The other one I want to do here is that restitution angle. I'm going to take that to a value of 6. Now this is the cage itself, so it shouldn't bend a whole heck of a lot, but we do want some bending to happen in there as it tumbles over end to end or side to side. So taking that down to 6 will allow it to do that. The rigidity is going to kind of fight with it because the rigidity is trying to keep it at its original shape. Okay, so those two are going to fight, but definitely we will see a little bit of damage, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. We don't want it to crush. We just want some slight dents and dings just to alter its shape just slightly. So let's hit play. All right, that falls down, and we can then go and look. Okay, right where it hit, we can see that those faces that were once square, they are no longer square. They definitely took just a little bit of damage there, okay, as it hit the ground. So that's actually working pretty good. That's about what we're after, and that should enable us to throw this car down the road and get some flipping action out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as a preset here. So we'll just choose preset and save in cloth preset. Now I've already got one in here, but we'll just call it roll bar 2. Okay, and let's go and open up our final scene. All right, perfect. Got a little crash there. Okay, let's try that again. Let's go open. And we'll open up our roll cage scene. Okay, so inside of our scene here, let's just get our bearings here. We have our little simple highway scene. Okay, and some barricades there on either side. Okay, and we already have our roll cage in our scene. So the first step, let's go ahead and make this an end cloth object. And we already have that preset, so let's go and load that. Okay, and then we'll double check. There's our self-collide. It's turned off, our thickness. And let's just make sure. There's our bend resistance, restitution, and rigidity, and our last one, our mass. Okay, so all of that is good. Okay, and now what I need to do is set up the environment so that the environment will be a collision to our roll cage. So we'll choose the highway there first, or the road, go to End Mesh, and choose Create Passive Collider. Now, as soon as I did that, notice what happened here. In addition to adding the end rigid shape that we needed, it went and added a thickness that I can already kind of tell, just because I've done it, is way too high. If I turn my collision thickness on, we can see that it goes way up into our surface. Okay, and let's just go to a wireframe here, and you can see that it's really way over the top thick. Okay, so we're going to take that down, and let's make this, okay, drop that down to 0.025. That's going to be much better. And we'll do the same thing with our barricades. We'll do enmesh, create passive. Again, too high. Let's drop that. And we'll just hit G just to repeat our last command. And thickness, interestingly enough, a different thickness, even though basically the same model there. And we'll drop that to 0.025 as well. All right, so now let's hit play. Okay, and we can see the roll cage just kind of drops onto our street, but no movement yet, no action yet. Okay, let's do that in our next lesson. So let's go ahead and just take a break here, and we'll pick this up again. So that is a look, our first look at our roll cage simulation.